Are you sure your feet are completely normal, or could they be quietly sending warning signs of a serious condition you have not noticed yet? The truth is, many people are already showing early signs of diabetes without realizing it, and they ignore these signals every single day because they seem small, harmless, and easy to dismiss. Most people wait until a blood test tells them something is wrong, but by that time the condition may have already been developing for months or even years. What they do not realize is that the body often gives early warnings, much earlier than expected, and one of the first places those warnings appear is in the feet. Dr. Michael Carter, who has spent more than 20 years working with patients dealing with metabolic conditions, once shared a case that clearly shows how easily these signs can be overlooked. A 67-year-old man named James Wilson came in for what he believed was a minor issue. He did not feel seriously ill, and he had no reason to think anything was wrong. For months, James had been noticing small changes. His feet often felt colder than usual, even in warm weather. Sometimes there was a light tingling sensation, almost like something moving under the skin. He ignored it, assuming it was simply part of aging. Later, the skin on his heels began to crack, and a small cut on his foot took much longer to heal than expected. Even then, he continued to overlook it. It was only when the symptoms became more persistent that he finally decided to get checked, and by that time, the condition had already progressed further than it should have. What shocked him the most was realizing that his body had been warning him all along, and he had simply missed the signs. In this video, you will discover 11 warning signs that can appear in your feet long before a diagnosis is made. Some of these signs may seem minor, and some of them might already be happening to you right now. But recognizing them early could make a real difference. Because once you understand these signals, you may never look at your body the same way again. Many of the earliest warning signs do not feel dangerous at all. In fact, they often feel so normal that most people ignore them completely. One of the most common signs is cold feet that seem unusual. You might notice that your feet feel colder than the rest of your body even when the weather is warm or when you are indoors. Many people assume this is simply poor circulation or just part of getting older, but in reality it can be an early signal that blood flow is starting to become less efficient due to rising blood sugar levels. Another sign that is often ignored is a tingling or crawling sensation under the skin. Some people describe it as a light buzzing feeling, while others say it feels like tiny insects moving across their feet. Because the sensation comes and goes, it is easy to dismiss. However, this can be one of the first signs that the nerves in your feet are starting to become affected. In the early stages, high blood sugar can begin to damage the small nerve endings. These nerves are responsible for sending signals between your brain and your feet, and when they are disrupted, the messages become unclear. That is why you may feel unusual sensations even when there is no obvious physical cause. A third early sign is mild numbness, especially in the toes. At first, it may feel like your foot has fallen asleep for a few seconds and then returns to normal. Because it does not last long, most people do not think it is serious, but over time, this numbness can become more frequent and more noticeable. This is exactly what happened to James Wilson. He remembered moments when his toes felt slightly numb, but the feeling always went away quickly. He never imagined that something so small could be connected to a much larger problem. The danger with these early signs is not how they feel, but how easy they are to ignore. They do not cause pain, they do not interrupt your daily routine, and they do not seem urgent, but they are often the first signals that something inside the body is beginning to change. And if these signals continue without being addressed, they can slowly lead to more serious symptoms that are much harder to reverse. As the condition begins to progress, the signs become harder to ignore, but many people still misunderstand what they are seeing. One of the most important warning signs is a wound that takes longer than usual to heal. It could be something very small like a cut or blister or even a scratch from wearing tight shoes. Under normal conditions, the body repairs these minor injuries quickly. But when blood sugar levels remain high, the healing process slows down significantly. This happens because high blood sugar affects the blood vessels, making it harder for oxygen and essential nutrients to reach the damaged area. Without proper circulation, the body cannot repair itself as efficiently as it should. What seems like a simple wound can remain open for days or even weeks longer than expected. Another sign that often appears around the same time is dry, cracked heels. At first, it may look like a simple skin issue caused by weather or dehydration. Many people try to fix it with lotion or basic skincare, but the problem keeps coming back. The reason behind this is deeper than just dry skin. When circulation is affected, the skin does not receive enough moisture and nutrients from within. Over time, it becomes weaker, less elastic, and more prone to cracking. In some cases, these cracks can become deep enough to bleed, creating an entry point for an infection. Changes in skin color are also a warning sign that should not be ignored. You might notice that certain areas of your feet appear darker, slightly reddish, or even pale compared to the surrounding skin. These changes are often subtle at first, which is why many people overlook them. However, skin color changes can indicate that blood flow is no longer consistent. Some areas may not be receiving enough oxygen, while others may be under stress due to inflammation. This uneven circulation is a clear signal that the body is struggling to maintain balance. Looking back, James Wilson remembered noticing that his skin did not look the same as before. There were slight color changes that he could not fully explain, but because there was no pain, he chose to ignore them. That is what makes this stage particularly dangerous. The signs are more visible, but they still do not feel urgent enough to take seriously. Many people continue with their daily lives, believing that these are minor issues that will go away on their own. But in reality, this is often the point where the condition begins to accelerate, quietly moving from early warning signs into something much more serious. As the condition continues to develop, the signals become more noticeable, but this is also the stage where many people make a dangerous mistake. They start to feel something is wrong, but they convince themselves it is not serious enough to act on. One of the most common signs at this stage is a burning sensation in the feet, especially at night. You may lie down to rest, and instead of feeling relaxed, your feet begin to feel warm, irritated, or even slightly painful. Some people describe it as a slow, uncomfortable heat that makes it difficult to fall asleep. Because it happens at night, many assume it is caused by fatigue or overuse during the day. But in reality, this sensation is often linked to nerve irritation. As blood sugar levels remain elevated, the nerves become more sensitive and begin sending abnormal signals to the brain. Another sign that often appears is a sharp or needle-like pain. Unlike the earlier tingling sensation, this feeling is more intense and harder to ignore. It may come suddenly like a quick stabbing sensation and then disappear just as quickly. Because it does not last long, people tend to dismiss it. However, this type of pain is a clear indication that the nerves are under stress. The communication between the brain and the feet is becoming unstable, and the signals are no longer consistent. What feels like a random discomfort is actually a warning that the nervous system is being affected more deeply. Swelling in the feet or around the ankles is another sign that should not be overlooked. You might notice that your shoes feel tighter than usual, or that your socks leave marks on your skin. At first, it may seem like a normal reaction after standing or walking for a long time. But when swelling appears frequently or without a clear reason, it can indicate that fluid is not being properly regulated in the body. Circulation is no longer working efficiently, and this puts additional pressure on the blood vessels and surrounding tissues. James Wilson experienced this stage as well. He began to notice discomfort at night, along with occasional sharp pains that he could not explain. His feet sometimes felt slightly swollen, but because he could still walk and carry on with his daily routine, he chose to ignore it. This is what makes this stage so risky. The body is no longer being subtle. The signals are stronger, clearer, and more persistent. But because they do not completely stop you from living your life, they are often pushed aside, and that delay in action can allow the condition to move into a much more serious phase. As the condition reaches a more advanced stage, the warning signs become more serious and far more difficult to reverse. At this point, the body is no longer giving subtle hints. It is clearly signaling that something is wrong. One of the most overlooked but important signs is the gradual loss of hair on the legs and feet. Many people never pay attention to this detail, or they assume it is simply a natural part of aging. However, hair growth depends heavily on healthy blood circulation. When blood flow becomes restricted, the hair follicles no longer receive the nutrients they need, and over time the hair begins to thin out or disappear completely. This is not just a cosmetic change. It is a visible sign that circulation has been reduced significantly, which can affect not only the skin but also the deeper tissues underneath. Another serious sign is a change in the condition of the toenails. You may notice that your toenails become thicker, more brittle, or discolored. In some cases, they may develop fungal infections that are difficult to treat and keep coming back. At first, this may seem like a minor hygiene issue, something that can be managed with basic care. But in reality, it often reflects a weakened defense system in the affected area. When circulation is poor and the immune response is reduced, the body becomes less effective at fighting off infections, especially in the extremities like the feet. For someone like James Wilson, these changes did not happen overnight. They developed slowly over time, making them easy to overlook. By the time he began to notice that something was clearly different, the underlying condition had already progressed to a more serious level. This stage is critical because the risks are no longer just about discomfort or inconvenience. The chances of complications increase and recovery becomes more challenging. If you are noticing these kinds of changes, it is important to understand that your body is no longer whispering. It is raising its voice, asking you to pay attention before the situation becomes even more difficult to manage. At this point, you have seen all 11 warning signs, from the smallest and easiest to ignore to the more serious changes that should never be overlooked. What makes these signs dangerous is not just the symptoms themselves, but how quietly they appear. They do not demand your attention right away, and they do not stop you from going through your daily routine. That is exactly why so many people miss them until it is too late. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it is this. Your body is always communicating with you. The problem is not that the signs are not there, but that we often do not recognize their importance early enough. In my opinion, the biggest mistake most people make is waiting for something obvious or severe before taking action. But by the time symptoms become serious, the condition is often much harder to manage. Paying attention to small changes early can make a significant difference in the long run. At the same time, it is important to understand that this video is for educational purposes only. It is not a medical diagnosis, and it should not replace professional medical advice. If you notice any of these signs, especially if they persist or become more noticeable, you should speak with a qualified healthcare provider for proper evaluation. Take a moment even today to check your feet. Look for anything unusual, whether it is temperature sensation or changes in the skin. That simple habit could help you catch a problem earlier than you expect. And if you found this information helpful, type yes in the comments so I know you are taking your health seriously. Share this video with someone who might need to see it, because many people are experiencing these signs without realizing what they mean. Finally, if you want to stay informed and learn how to recognize early warning signs before they become serious, make sure to subscribe and stay connected. Because sometimes the smallest signals can tell you the most important things about your health.